Hello, this is Todd Luck, and the Nacelle Company, which puts out shows like The Toys That Made Us, wanted to get into the toy industry themselves. And so they bought up some lesser known properties to develop for toys and animation and comics. And because we live in the world of the MCU, they decided to make them into this universe of misfit toys that's connected to each other. And so this is a review of the very first comic they're putting out. And so this is a comic of the toys that probably didn't make us, but were really awesome anyway. And so this is Nacelleverse number 0. This is out right now at your local comic shops, and it's available digitally on Comixology/Kindle. And so the properties that are in here are Robo Force from the 80s, Biker Mice from Mars from the 90s, Sectaurs and Power Lords from the 80s, and the Great Garloo, which was a remote-controlled robot monster from the 60s. And Nacelle also has the rights for the Cowboys of Moo Mesa. Now, they're not featured in here prominently, but there are several references to Cowboys of Moo Mesa in here, and they will be developed for toys and animation and all that as well. And they've already put out toys of several of the brands, and you can either order them directly from Nacelle, or you can get them from, say, Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment Earth, your local comic shop, things like that. And any property you don't see featured here will have toys coming in the future. But this is no toy review, my friends. This is a comic review. And so let's take a look at this issue. It is $5.99 for 40 pages of story, which is a pretty good price in today's industry. And so looking at the cover here, I love the cover art. It looks great, very colorful. It captures all of the characters perfectly, with the possible exception that the Sectaurs look a little bit too cartoony, but it could be worse. We'll get to that in a minute. But overall, I think this is a very effective piece of art showing off all these different brands in a really wonderful way. However, this artwork is a little bit smaller on here than we're used to seeing on most modern covers, because it has to fit in all of these logos. But I think that is a very, very good idea on their part, because not everyone is going to know or remember what these characters look like. And so having these logos on the cover lets you immediately know what you're getting. This is not a tribute. This is not a knockoff. This is not, that DC guy who kind of looks like Adam Power. No, this is the real brands. These are Power Lords. These are Robo Force. These are Sectaurs, right? And so when we open this up, we're greeted to a backstory page with a lot of text, even though this is the first comic they've ever put out. And this makes sense, because even though this is 40 pages, they're trying to fit 5 different properties in here. And so there's not a lot of room to orient the reader in the stories themselves. And so even though this is a lot of text, it does help kind of fill in some of the blanks they don't have time to deal with in the comic itself. All right, so this comic is divided into different segments. They're all written by Melissa Flores with different artists. And so the first segment is a Power Lord segment featuring the Great Garloo. And so first of all, let me just say the artwork here is wonderful. I think the alien designs are fantastic. They fit right in with Power Lords, as does the design and story of the Great Garloo. And so the Great Garloo starts out as this little guy, and he is at a spaceport trying to get home when he discovers that his planet has been mysteriously destroyed. And so this alien delivery driver comes to him and says, hey, I'm about to make some deliveries to different planets. Why don't you come tag along, see where I go, and if you like one of those places, you can stay there and it can be your new home. And I think this is a really solid premise for a story. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of room to be developed in only 40 pages, but I will give them credit for coming up with something kind of clever here. And of course, on that first planet, they're going to run into the Power Lords, and I think the evil aliens are well rendered, as are our 2 Power Lords. So Power Lords are essentially these people with superpowers that fight this evil alien empire. And so essentially the way it's portrayed here is Star Wars with superpowers. And I'm totally down for that. Give me the miniseries. You know, here there's not a lot of room for the action, so the villains get taken care of very easily. But I think it's a pretty solid setup for the upcoming Power Lords miniseries. And then we're off to the planet Symbion, which is a planet of insectoid people who ride giant bugs and they fight with swords and guns. And so they are a very odd kind of fit for this story. They're much more primitive, and we establish at the beginning that the Sectaurs don't know what a spaceship is, but by the end of this segment, somehow they're repairing one. So the art in this segment is very bright and colorful, which I do like, but it is also way more stylized. And I just think it's a little too stylized, a little too extreme in, its cartoonishness for Sectaurs, which, previously in the 80s was portrayed with very realistic artwork. I will say that, no artist should be judged on a single comic book, and I'll show you some other artwork that this artist has put out at the end. But then in the next segment, they get their ass to Mars, and the artwork looks like this. This is gorgeous. This is Biker Mice from Mars. And so this is set well before the cartoon series. This is back when the mice were in control of the planet. This is before the Plutarchian invasion and devastation of Mars. And so this is actually the biker mice before they became all messed up and became cyborgs. The artwork here is absolutely gorgeous. I love the rendering. I love the storytelling. Everything is spot on, and it's gorgeous. The artist here is Francis Portela, who I would say is a definite keeper. I would have never thought I would say buy Biker Mice from Mars for the artwork, but here it is. And this segment also happens to have the most satisfying action in the special. So there you go. And so the final segment for the special is Robo Force, which is set on Earth. And the Robo Force here is completely redesigned with a completely new story. In this version, the scientist chick created Robo Force some years ago to be these cutting edge crime fighting robots, but they got overshadowed by another new series of robots. And so now there are these losers who do menial jobs at a bar, and they're trying to kind of prove themselves that they're worthy and that they can be heroes. I definitely have some mixed feelings about the artwork here. It's a little too simplified and stylized for me. And plus, it can be inconsistent. So, for instance, this is Max 89, our hero, and this is what his head should look like. But in other panels, it looks taller and rounder. And again, we see that in this panel as well. And then, there's just missing details. For instance, we can see the detail on Max's chest, but not the robots that are behind him. It's just kind of odd. So this artwork is by Dio Neves, and he will be the artist on the Robo Force miniseries that's coming out. But like I said before, don't judge an artist by a single comic that they've worked on. This is an example of what his artwork looked like over at DC Comics, and I think this looks great, and so he is certainly capable of doing more than what we saw in this particular special. And remember that artist for Sectaurs? This is what he did on an Image comic called Bonehead, and I think this looks fantastic. And if he is on the Sectaurs miniseries, I hope it looks more like this. So regardless of what the interior artwork looks like, this is definitely going to be what the cover looks like, or at least the main cover for Robo Force #1 coming out in April. And so we're going to have the same writer on this one. It's going to be, unfortunately, $4.99 for a regular sized issue, but it's only going to be a 3-issue miniseries, so there's not much commitment here. And so this is the publishing schedule for Nacelleverse. So we're going to have an issue come out every month for the next 12 months, starting with the 3-issue Robo Force miniseries, starting in April. Then in July, we'll have the 3-issue Biker Mice from Mars miniseries. In October, Sectaurs will have their 3-issue miniseries, and then January of next year will be Power Lords for their 3-issue miniseries. And these miniseries are supposed to lead into the animation, and so they'll be part of the same story. And I wouldn't read too much into the artwork here. I know this is taking off a variant cover, and so most likely these are just taken off covers and not necessarily reflective of interior artwork. And so what do I think about my first foray into the Nacelleverse? So I would say I'm not really all that into the fact that these are now connected properties in the same universe. Garloo and the Power Lords fit pretty well together, but other than that, it's just a very odd fit, but it's not a deal breaker. I think it's okay that they've kept the story from the original toy lines for most of the properties, except for Robo Force. Robo Force has a new story, and there's just too little of it in here to judge. I'm not particularly impressed, but again, it's just so few pages of this new concept for them that I can't really judge much one way or the other. And so the new story for Robo Force is supposed to be a meta story. It's supposed to be reflective of how Robo Force was premiered at the 1983 Toy Fair the same time as Transformers, and they got overshadowed by Transformers, and this is supposed to be an explanation as to why the line only lasted 1 year. I would be very interested to know what effect Transformers allegedly had on Robo Force, because I will tell you, as the perspective of a child in the 80s who was in that demographic for those brands, it would have never occurred to me that this was competing with Transformers, or that I had to choose between this and Transformers. Why not have both? I've always assumed that Robo Force, like a lot of other toy lines, just didn't get that ongoing animated series it needed to promote itself, and thus, only lasted a year in a really crowded toy market, similar to, say, Sectaurs and Power Lords and countless other toy lines. But regardless, I will be giving this new Robo Force a try and letting you know what I think. Again, first issue hits in April, and this will lead into the Robo Force animated series, which is supposed to be the first animated series that Nacelle puts out, and that should be pretty close to completion at this point, I think. The last I heard, Nacelle was shopping around the animated series, so there's no word about what network or streaming service they'll end up on. All right, that's it. Like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.